Hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to School Night 2021. Woo! Miss Landry here, and I'm going to explain to you all about what your students are going to experience in AP Psychology this year. I wish I could express to you how excited I am to have your students in this class. This is probably one of the best classes we teach at Kent. Of course, I'm a little biased, but I think the kids are going to enjoy the topic. It's all about them. So let's get into that. So the goals of this video, I'm going to introduce myself really briefly. We'll talk about what a day in AP Psych is like. We'll talk about how we grade and how we use Canvas. And then finally, I'll give you some tips for the AP test. So let's start with me. Here's all my background. Take your time if you want to read it. I'm not going to go over it. I'm trying to keep these videos short because I know you have quite a few to watch. I do want to, though, go over my theories of teaching, I guess you could say. The first thing is what I want your kids to get out of this class, besides a 5 on the AP test, is a love of science. And not just science as a thing, but science as a process. I definitely want them to be critical thinkers. They need to look at news and look at science and say, gosh, I don't know, is that real? How did they get that? And by having the skills and understanding how experiments are done, I think they're going to become much better at this. I also use neuroscience and research to help them find more effective ways to learn and study, and how I teach is all based on neuroscience. And finally, not quite finally, but I also want them to feel safe and confident in the class, because when a student feels confident, they are willing to take more risks, and risk-taking is where the learning happens. And of course, I want them to be as successful as possible on that AP test. So let's see how we're going to do that. So to start with, if we look at what a day looks like, so the night before they will have done some homework. And generally this is 1 to 2 mods, we call them modules in the book, that they have to read and take notes. They can either use the guided notes that I provide, or they can write their own. They might also have to do a free response question. They also might have to maybe finish up some lab questions. But generally the homework shouldn't take more than maybe a half hour, 45 minutes. When they come into class the next day, they will have a warm-up question. Generally, the warm-up will kind of review and retrieve information from the class before. So for example, we just finished with statistics. So I might ask a question about inferential statistics or descriptive statistics. And it's a really good form of retrieval practice. After that, they have a reading check. So this is a quiz. They get 1 try, but they do get to use their notes from their reading. And then we have discussion about the notes as well as the topic at hand. They take notes during that time. We have some really good discussions. We'll sometimes have an activity in a lab, and then we'll review before the day is over. And then I just want to go over real quickly how I use neuroscience in the class. The testing effect is really important for this class. The testing effect is some research that's been done previously that shows doing tests on material that, even if you haven't studied it yet, is more powerful. It's probably the most powerful way of learning. There's something about our brains that when we take a test, we tend to remember the information better than if we read it or study it. And so your students will be doing a lot of practice tests, because that testing effect is so important. And so I'm trying to get them in the habit also, when they're studying for a test, to use a practice test. Retrieval practice is another really important skill. When you think about when you were in school, teachers spend so much time putting all this information into your head, and we don't practice taking it out. And so the more often that we're able to pull that information out, the stronger those neuronal connections become. And so they're able to get that information out even faster. Interleaving, this has to do with mixing up and spacing out your practice. So don't just study one type of thing. So an example would be like in math, for example, if you're learning how to do areas of different shapes, don't only study squares and practice that and then do circles. You got to mix them up together. There's something, again, about the brain that if you have to identify the type of question or the topic, you remember it better. And then finally, dual coding. This has to do with vocabulary. So understanding words in more than one way. So don't just have a definition. And a fun way to do this, an example would be to take note cards, put the words or the phrases on the note cards without definitions on the back. Then you roll a dice. Let's say you get a 4. You're going to pull out 4 random cards. And then you have to either organize them in some way that makes sense, you have to connect them in some way. So dual coding is really important. So pictures, mnemonics, anything that codes that word more than one way is really important. The science has come out showing that rereading and highlighting is actually the least effective way to study. And unfortunately, that is how most of our students study. And even if you ask them and tell them and show them the research, they still fall back to that. And that has to do with the comfort of, you're doing something that you've already looked at, so it feels comfortable, but that's not learning. Learning tends to be a little uncomfortable, and that's not a bad thing. So, all right, next we are going to go into grading. Well, let's talk about Canvas first, sorry. So Canvas I use pretty heavily. Basically, I organize everything by class day. So if you look at this, let me get a little pen and I will draw on it. So for example, yesterday or Tuesday, we went over correlation and statistics. So the date is right there. This is really important, I think, for students. If they're absent for sports or travel, if they want to go back and review something we did, it's super easy for them to find it. Once they click on that day, then it opens up the day for them, and this is just a screenshot of a part of it, and everything is hyperlinked that they could possibly need. And it's on early, so I usually put this on a week ahead of time. They have their notes, they have guided notes for the day, they have what homework they are supposed to be doing, and all of it is hyperlinked. In addition, I usually put additional videos in there as resource for them. They don't necessarily have to do it for homework, but it's just a nice resource for them if they want to study that way. In terms of grading, it is total points, and their homework the points fall into 3 categories. So I'm trying to erase this little circle here. There we go. So the first category is reading checks. These are basically small, very numerous quizzes. So after reading a module for homework, when they come in the next day, they have a reading check. These are 5 to 10 points, open note, really low stakes, and it's basically meant to encourage the student to read the textbook because we do not have enough time to cover every chapter in that textbook. So by reading it, they're getting all the stuff that maybe we didn't get to in class because we just don't have enough time. There's a lot that we cover. Then we have unit tests. Those will come after the end of a unit. There's 100, it's 100 points. It will absolutely mimic the AP test. So every unit test is that testing effect, and they're practicing for the AP test. So it'll have the same percentage of multiple choice and free response questions as the test. And then finally, we also have some projects, some guided notes, and some labs. So those kind of fall under daily work. So those are the 3 categories. Pretty simple. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. AP Classroom is actually put out by College Board, and that is who writes the test. And so I use this AP Classroom. It's free to your students. I use it a lot. And so here's an example of what is in there. The reason why I use it, first of all, it's by College Board, and that's who writes the test. Why wouldn't you use a resource from the group that writes the test? It has daily videos on there. It has summaries of the information. One of the most powerful things that it has, and I can't stress this enough, that testing effect is it has practice questions, right? It has not only multiple choice, but also free response. It has these progress checks at the end of each unit. And so I assign those to be due the day before the test so that we can review it. It also will give your student a report on what areas based on their practice test that they need to really work on. And then finally, each unit will tell you, it's kind of nice, it tells you what percent that unit makes up of the test, if that makes sense. So I definitely use this, and the kids have absolute use of this where they can go in and make their own practice tests. So it's a wonderful resource. And then finally, the AP test. Woo! That is May 3rd, 2022. So it comes pretty early. It's the second day of AP testing. Basically, they're trying to look at how much did you understand the concepts we covered, and do you understand studies in psychology, the pros, the cons, the strengths, the weaknesses. That is what it covers. It is 2 hours in length. So there's 100 multiple choice questions to start. The students get 70 minutes for that. That accounts for 67% of their score. And then there's 2 free response questions, usually with multiple pieces. So it's like number 1, A, B, C. That takes 50 minutes, and that is 33% of their score. We will absolutely practice our timing. We're going to practice each piece. We're going to practice pacing. If your student does require extended time, please, please, please communicate that with me earlier rather than later so that I can get that organized. And I think that's it. If you ever have any questions at all, please email me. My email's right there. I would suggest not calling me. That's why I didn't put my phone number on here. I teach in both the upper school and the middle school, and so I'm very rarely anywhere near a phone. So please shoot me an email and I will get back to you within 24 hours. Any questions at all. So have a wonderful night. I feel so lucky to have your kids in this class. We have a fun small class of 13 kids, and I think we're going to have an amazing year. So thanks. Have a great night.